Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I will be playing the Vampire Count, and I'm facing off against an Empire opponent. Definitely, again, this is one of my favorite maps. I really love the kind of climactic, setting this makes for battles, and I think it's a lot of fun. So, anyways, my army composition, I have a front line of skeleton warriors. I feel like these guys are very, very good against the Empire, and against Empire, I don't like to get the anti-large version of the Skeleton Warriors. I feel like these guys suffice. They're a little bit cheaper. You're able to pinch out 75 extra gold per unit, which can allow you to get an extra group of Graveguard or things like that. And again, what the Empire has in terms of large units, they're usually not going to send them into your Skeleton Warriors from my experience. So I feel like these guys having the shielded ability makes some pretty good fodder against the Empire. And as you can see, it's going to pay off quite well. He brought multiple groups of crossbowmen, so that shielded buff will make them excellent fodder for those first few volleys. Behind them, I got Graveguard, and again, these guys are armored and shielded, so I want my army to be very resistant to his missile fire. Again, Empire does usually bring a lot of missile infantry, whether it be Outriders, crossbowmen, handgunners, all that type of funny business. So again, these guys are pretty good investment, and regardless, they have pretty good weapon strength, stats across the board, so I really like Graveguard, and I feel like they're pretty solid infantry. Behind them, I have Graveguards with great weapons. So again, this will kind of be my front line that'll absorb the initial shock. Skeletons will take that fire, and of course, they're going to crumble pretty quickly usually. So these guys usually fill the void there and start taking the fire and holding the line. And these guys can then be plugged into where he has very heavily armored troops, like great swords or things like that. And that armor piercing will be quite good. So again, big fan of these guys. You don't want to have all great weapon Graveguard, but they're good to mix in with the ranks in my opinion. But again, doing a lot of testing with Vampire Counts, so I still have a lot to learn myself. Then over here I have Blood Knights. So something I like about the Vampire Counts is I like to have compositions that can win the cavalry battle, because if you can, an Empire will usually bring cavalry or some sort of mobile units. I believe they have some Demogryph Knights back there, I'm not sure, but regardless, if you can win the cavalry battle and just have that huge flexibility advantage in terms of cavalry flanking and outmaneuvering, it's just so pertinent. So I actually brought a group of Blood Knights. I brought a group of Dire Wolves, and these guys are great. They're so fast with 95 run speed. They can scurry around enemy lines, cut through openings in the flanks, and can really get back to those missile infantry and do great work. So then I also brought a group of Black Knights. So I just wanted to really overload on cavalry and try and win that battle. So we will see how that pans out for me. As far as leadership goes, I believe I have a Vampire Lord, so he's back here. He actually has Invocation of the Heck and Gaze in the Gash. I usually don't bring a lot of the other abilities. Sometimes I'll bring Winds of Death against the dwarves, or depending on the circumstances, I may bring other abilities. But regardless, I feel like those are the two best abilities, and it's it helps you pinch out some extra spending money if you just bring those two. So then of course I have a White King. It's always a good idea to keep a White King, or something I've been wanting to do is bring a Necromancer, but for that passive regeneration across your army. I think that's very, very strong, but I always forget to do it. And but regardless, this White King does have the Encourage ability. So if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking here, I think he does. Yes, and it will be quite good to keep him among the troops because it will help with leadership. So that's my army. For my opponent, he brought a group of Empire Knights here. So these are kind of similar to the Black Knights. They're anti-infantry, pretty heavily armored, so definitely decent troops. As far as leadership goes, he has a General of the Empire, 2 Light Wizards with the Nets of Amnitok and the Missile ability. So that's all he brought. So again, those are very cost effective, and he can net down my whole line and then just tee off with those crossbowmen. So it's a very cool synergy. Then he brought an Amber Wizard, so it looks like he has Flock of Doom and then the Manticore summon. So, and that's actually on the most expensive mount, which gives him Blood Roar. So as far as his leader, of course, he brought a General of the Empire. I don't know if he has any potions actually. It's kind of hard to tell. He might, I don't know, but regardless, he should bring potions. For his army, he has crossbowmen. These guys are pretty decent. A lot of the Vampire Count's infantry aren't heavily armored, so these guys are a pretty good choice. They have good range, and they get obstructed less often. A lot of times with handgunners, if you have them on like a flat surface and they're in a melee engagement, they're not going to get good shots in those really tight engagements. So I like crossbowmen and correlers and those type of units a lot. So spearmen, pretty good. Anti-large, charge defense against large foes, and again, a lot of Vampire Count players will bring a ton of Crypt Horrors. So I didn't, unfortunately for him, but regardless, these are a good, cheap investment against Crypt Horrors. Then, of course, he has great swords in the back line to do the heavy hitting, the armor piercing, and, deal with my Graveguard. And that's pretty much it. Spearmen, crossbowmen, 2 great swords, and then over here, he also brought a great cannon. So definitely not a terrible choice. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, guys. So as this map usually encourages, we're both going to advance on each other in the center flank here. My opponent has positioned his wizard crew up here. He has quite a few, 2 Light Wizards and an Amber Wizard. An issue with that, I think one Light Wizard would have sufficed because that's going to run his Winds of Magic really low. So I'd use a Gaze of Nagash here. I figured, he has potions. I don't feel too dirty doing it, so he'll be able to just probably heal up through that. But regardless, there's a little bit of damage. A fair amount. That's nothing absurd, so I didn't feel too bad about that. So he retaliates in kind and shoots 2 magic missile effects at my Vampire Lord. Thankfully, they didn't do much of anything, and I do have Invocation of Nehek, so I'm going to be able to heal through those type of effects usually. But regardless, if all these guys dive bomb my Vampire Lord, it's going to be tough to survive. So what I was doing is keeping him with the Blood Knights, because Blood Knights absolutely devastate large units. They have really high damage and anti-large stats as well, so very good there. So my opponent here is, I'm going to be starting to take some pot shots here as the Skeletons and the White King, you can see they got their shields raised. They're ready for these crossbowmen. So they're advancing on my opponent here, and hopefully it'll go well for me. We'll see. But I definitely feel I have a really strong infantry corps, and he has mostly spearmen, but he's getting a huge investment here. These amounts that his Empire, General of the Empire and Amber Wizard on are quite expensive. So you can see he's kind of targeting and trying to get my Vampire Lord isolated, which is very, very common strategy for the Empire. But regardless, I keep him with all these troops. So right now we're engaging. I pull my Black Knights around, and I'm able to outflank him and get them back to these cannons. So that's good. And across the front line, we're just going to get a solid engagement. So these Black Knights are going to get back here, and you can see my opponent immediately reacts. But I was very happy because these guys are going to get shut down here. So that's definitely solid. And, if these troops are wasting time here, I'm totally fine with that. So in the front line, everything's going to plan. Skeletons are engaging. My opponent got a nice flank with these Empire Knights and tied up some Grave Guards with great weapons, but that's not that ideal for them. So, and I'm able to, when I pulled back here to engage with the Black Knights, he sent most of his troops on auxiliary to deal with that, and that allowed my Blood Knights to get through and just jump on these crossbowmen and absolutely destroy them. You'll notice their morale took a huge hit. They're already at 7, and that's because these guys do cause terror, like most of these Vampire Count units do, which was very good. So my opponent pulls his Light Wizards over here, and I believe he summoned a Manticore as well. So he's engaging here, but this is not good for him. These Light Wizards are going to get decimated because they are considered large units when they're on those mounts. And I also get an Invocation of Nehek, which is so good on these Blood Knights. It just makes them so valuable. And you can see the General of the Empire is taking big damage. Blood Knights are just so good against anti-large. And the Black Knights, they did take damage, but they were able to come back. So my opponent's surrounded here. My Vampire Lord got an Invocation of Nehek off, and things are looking pretty good. In the front line, it's a pretty even split, I would say, if you guys want to take a topical look. Over here, he has some Spearmen and Greatswords who were able to overwhelm me because he did get a good rear charge with that cavalry unit he had over there. And in the middle, it's kind of just a stalemate. Grave Guards just, fighting against Spearmen. And his Spearmen, for, how cheap they are, they're holding the line quite well and, giving him time to fight back here. And he did get another rear charge with these Empire Knights, but I was able to support my Grave Guard here. But you can see a lot of these guys are crumbling because they're going to take a huge morale hit from these as well. So back here, this is really kind of the epicenter of the battle and the determining factor. So my Blood Knights are taking, some damage because they are fighting a ton of powerful units, and there's also a group of Greatswords mixed in here with that armor piercing. So, and again, these guys have, what is the armor on Blood Knights? 110, so the armor piercing of the Greatswords will be quite good against them. And you can see here, I'm just sticking on that General of the Empire, trying to get him to use his potions, just doing as much as I can. And these Blood Knights are great at that. They're very fast, and they're very good at tying up large units. I believe he did take some losses in terms of his leadership. I'm not sure if he lost those Light Wizards. Let's take a overhead view here. So it looks like the Manticore is back there. His General of the Empire did get away, so he's in decent shape now. But regardless, a lot of his troops on the ground, after he invested so heavily in these wizard units, and they didn't pay off that much. They kind of got tied off with those Blood Knights and are having some issues. But he gets a nice Flock of Doom off, which is going to get a pretty big effect. And you can see he pretty much won that western flank. All my Skeletons are crumbling. The Grave Guard took huge damage from that rear shock. You guys didn't see it earlier, but my Direwolves did get around to decimate these crossbowmen, but now they're repositioning, and they're going to be starting to shoot again here. So, it was definitely a tough situation. And that General of the Empire with those potions is very, very resilient. So he does pull his Empire Knights. They did get routed earlier, but it looks like he's trying to just whittle down my Blood Knights. But again, Blood Knights are excellent anti-cavalry, and you can see these Empire Knights are going to just get decimated. And just every Invocation of Nehek I can, I'm using on these guys, because they're a very expensive unit. So the longer you can keep them active and, generating value, you're going to get, good results from that. So this group of Greatswords was able to crumble my flank here, and my opponent was able to reform some ranks over here. But still, I had a very strong force because I was able to just decimate his line over here. So he's definitely going to have a hard time. He has the General of the Empire left. I believe he has Davy Crockett flying around somewhere. looks maybe he's back there. No, that's the Manticore. So I think those light wizards did go down, because that just goes to show how fast Blood Knights can just destroy monstrous units. Not monstrous, but large. White King's still in good health too, and I believe he still has his potions, so that's definitely very, very good. So he's going to go over here and, you know, single-handedly, with the fear that he causes and these units already kind of being in bad shape, you can see that their leadership is just drops as soon as the White King gets in there to 10. And, you know, these guys, you know, took a leadership hit, and it's kind of wavering every time he rides through. So definitely doing some laps through the troops there. Very, very good good use of him. And every time he lands at General of the Empire, I just sick the Blood Knights on him. And, you know, he did lose that cavalry battle, so like I was telling you guys earlier, that gives me the flexibility to just, you know, chase after him with these guys. And you can see his HP pool is going to start to tank here once they get a decent little surround on him. And, you know, his leadership is negative 150. that's pretty serious. So at that point, you know, the battle was pretty much over. The Graveguard did pretty good in the front line, holding up, but again, he invested way too heavily, in my opinion, on those wizard units. He had the 2 light wizards. He had the Amber Wizard on the Imperial Griffin, I believe is what it's called, and then a General of the Empire on the Griffin as well. So in that really heavy investment there, that's like a good 1,000, you know, plus resources. If he had just like toned down, like the Amber Wizard probably didn't need to be on that. But I guess it does give him very good combat stats and makes him very cost effective in that way. But, you know, he just needed a few more units in the front line. Maybe another group of great swords. One less group of crossbowmen would have probably been good, because the missile units, especially, you know, vampire counts have pretty mobile units. Like Cryptors can circle around and just tear through those units. So maybe just investing a little bit more. And if he had brought like some Demogryph Knights with halberds, and that in conjunction with the Empire Knights, he might have been able to win the cavalry battle and defend his cannon against my Black Knights, that type of thing. So, and again, those light wizards got really tied up by the Blood Knights and got taken down. So skeletons did very good. You can see they even racked up a lot of kills. That was very impressive. So the Graveguard did good, and the great weapons, they did okay. You know, they did their job. But I basically just sicked them on the great swords. But my opponent did, you know, he did a really good job considering. His army composition was a little rough against mine. These spearmen were not in a good situation. You know, they were just stuck fighting against Graveguard and units that they were going to do literally nothing against. His greatswords did provide, you know, good support, but at the end of the day, he probably needed another group of greatswords, perhaps, maybe some Demogryph Knights, scale down the cavalry value on these, or bring one less and bring a group of Demogryph Knights, and could have easily maybe had it. But again, that's just my 2 cents, and he was definitely a good player. So good game to Commissar Human. Look forward to seeing you again on Ladder, and thank you all for watching. Really appreciate the support, and more content coming soon. Take care, guys.